Welcome, and thank you for watching Magic EdTech's Executive Roundtable session. My name is Laura Hakala, and I'll be moderating this event, which is about the invisible pressures of executive leadership in EdTech. When people think about executive leadership, they tend to focus on what's visible, the decisions, the strategy, the outcomes. But a lot of the real work happens behind the scenes when it comes to navigating uncertainties or balancing competing priorities, um, or making calls when there really isn't a clear or correct answer. And that's especially true in ed tech right now. The market is shifting quickly, budgets are under scrutiny and they're getting tighter, and expectations around AI are accelerating. And all the while, leaders are still being asked to make high stakes decisions in real time. Today's conversation is about those less visible parts of leadership. In recognition of Women's History Month, I'm joined by two leaders who are navigating these challenges at the highest level. And while their experiences may shape how they lead, this conversation is really about leadership itself, what it demands, how it's changing, and how to do it well right now. I am honored to be joined by our panelists, Kemi Akinsanya-Rose, who's the Chief Operating Officer with Cambium Learning Group, and Sabine Mullin, who's the Chief Marketing Officer with Curriculum Associates. Welcome to you both, and thank you for joining me today. Kemi, would you please introduce yourself and give some background about what brought you to your current role with Cambium?
Absolutely, and really excited to be here. Thank you for the invite. Again, my name is Kemi Akinsanya-Rose, Chief Operating Officer of Cambium Learning Group. And my journey to EdTech, I would say, is a little bit of a zigzag. My Both my parents are from actually the education area, industry in general. Both were teachers, superintendents, and actually higher ed professors of education. So education, I would say, is in my DNA. After spending about 14 years at American Express and JP Morgan, I decided to change careers and just try and do a little bit of reinvention, and actually took the leap into education and started working for the Bloomberg administration at the New York City Department of Education. So I was part of a program called the Eli Broad Foundation Residency, which is a bridge program that takes people from the for-profit industry and trains them to enter the education industry. And I did that program, and I was sponsored by New York City DOE, where I spent about 3 years. And then after that, I did I shouldn't say little, a big stint in nonprofit with a company called Expeditionary Learning, now called EL Education. Spent multiple years then, and actually help them scale their professional learning business and their curriculum business, which was really interesting. And then last of all, really decided to take another little bit of a pivot and come into combine the technology with education and come into the ed tech world, and started off with Cambium about 3 years ago as their COO, and have been enjoying kind of the fusion between education and technology since then.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And Sabina, same to you. Would you please introduce yourself for our audience?
Thank you, Laura. It's great to be here. I'm Sabine Mullin, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Curriculum Associates. My career started actually in financial technology in marketing, and there I held a variety of roles across solutions, marketing, product marketing, branding. And I was always the person that sort of got put on the initiatives that maybe didn't have a clear owner, the ones that were in different parts of the world. And one thing that I really took away from that was being able to make sense of ambiguity and bring disparate teams together and really make sense of what we needed to do. And I think has prepared me well for the role I have now. About 10 years ago, I made the shift into EdTech. It was sort of by chance, but I've never looked back. I joined HMH at the time, and there held a variety of marketing leadership roles, and got to rebrand the company in 2024. And then last year, joined Curriculum Associates to head up marketing.
Excellent. Well, we are very happy that you've both joined us today, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts on today's topic. So, I would like to begin by talking about unspoken pressures. And Sabina, I'll begin this first question with you. What would you say is the hardest part of your role that people may not see from the outside?
That's a great question. And I'll share two pieces, and there are probably many more. Um, One thing that's really difficult at times is to truly stay focused. We have done a concerted effort this year to be really clear about our goals as a company and as a team and really focus on those things that are going to move us forward. But there's never a shortage of good ideas. There are many different things that come our way, many opportunities that look wonderful. And what's really hard is having to say no to really good things, so we can make great space for the great things. We have limited resources, limited time, but really staying focused on those things that we commit to and like being willing to say, hey, this other thing is just not something we are able to focus on right now. And the second thing I would say is, being decisive, leading teams, helping them make decisions, giving them guidance when we oftentimes like have very limited information. Especially right now, things are moving so fast, but we can't stand still. We sometimes have to, oftentimes have to choose action and moving forward and progress, and maybe making those decisions with imperfect data. So that's the second one I would add.
That's
I would love to build on that. You mentioned staying focused. I think when I think about the ed tech industry in general and what our customers are facing in districts, schools, in states across the nation, I do a lot of conversation around this concept called VUCA. So VUCA is a concept that talks about, how do you, well, I think it was coined several decades ago, but it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so, you know, my organization, and I think lots of organizations have been dealing with what I call VUCA world for a while, but I would say last year in particular, the VUCA world became, perhaps not something that we had to deal with perhaps every, month. It was like literally every day. And so I have a lot of empathy with our customers in schools and districts and states because there's a lot of volatility in terms of uncertainty in the industry in general. And that's, I think, one of the pressures that we don't see on the inside. I think it's an external, I call it the whipsaw event, where one day you think the ground is here and the next day the ground is not there. And so what is your response to that in terms of leading teams and how to keep them focused? I think has been a definite challenge for me and many teams. But I would say one of the things I really leaned in on is tying it back to our purpose. And at Cambium, our purpose is really around how do we make sure that all of our students and teachers and parents and communities feel seen, valued, and supported. That's our North Star. And I think last year that was like something I had to keep on coming back to over and over and over again to go to really refocus and pivot as needed.
That's a great reminder that tying everything back to the mission is going to help everyone stay focused. And that's another good example of how it comes from the leadership level down. So if you're the one always bringing it back there, that's going to get embedded in the DNA of your company and the decisions that you're making. So follow up to both of you around, speaking of pressures, how do you manage the tension between short-term revenue expectations versus long-term product integrity? Either of you can jump in.
I would say just when we think, so clearly there's definitely revenue expectations or bookings expectations. I think we've done a pretty good job of being able to, I call plant the seeds and figure out like planting what and seeds that we want to harvest in the long term while dealing with short-term pressures in terms of not just the top line but also the bottom line. So, we are very much building the muscle of making sure that we're looking at profitability, I would say, not just the revenue side or the booking side of the equation. So to me, a good fiduciary agent of any organization is looking at profitability. And that obviously requires both the top and bottom line. And I think in times where there are challenges, with the top line, we have to be responsible and make sure that, we are right sizing the organization and making sure that the profitability is where it needs to be while not losing sight of the long term, because we definitely do not want to lose our shirt in terms of making, I call it cutting into the bone. There are organizations that I've seen just cut way into the bone and in terms of just not making those down payment, planting the seeds for the future, and they're just playing the short game on both the top and the bottom line. And I think I'm really proud of what we've done in terms of just being able to take a more focused and analytical approach, taking a look at the data, understanding what our core competencies are, and leaning on a lot of our subject matter experts in our organizations around product, engineering, sales, and marketing, and being able to adjust and pivot, because I think change is not to be cliche, but change is the new normal. And I think, building that change muscle last year is something that, we went to the gym a lot on in terms of building that muscle. And we're going to continue to need to do that going forward for sure.
I like
I
that.
agree that it's, go ahead.
Oh, please go ahead, Sabina.
I agree with Kemi that it is important to operationalize and build for the future. I think part of it is to build a resilient and flexible workforce and culture so that we can pivot. One thing that's really important to us though is to truly like serve our customers and focus on the implementations that we have today, the work that we have to do to um, have a great, strong implementation to serve our educators in the best way possible so that they see us as a true partner. And if we deliver value and great student outcomes, I believe that that continues to build on itself and builds a stronger relationship for the future on which we can then continue to build and get feedback, build better products, continue to enhance, and continue to bring great solutions and expand into the relationships that we already have.
I love that you said that. And it just reminds me of, when we think of our customers, I think customers want solutions that work. Period. They're efficacious in the classroom. I think post pandemic, it's even more important because when you think of the pandemic season, there was a lot of money being put into the system with ESSER funding and that sort of thing because we had to do what we needed to do to make sure students weren't, slipping through the cracks during the pandemic. And I think post pandemic, now there's such, people in our customer base are really trying to figure out, like, I have all these tools. I have teachers that have like 50 tools in the classroom. And so now what do I do? And I also have a situation where I'm dealing with a budget crisis, perhaps, not everybody. And so I have, again, empathy for our customers that are dealing and grappling with, smaller budgets, tighter budgets, plus an influx of tools, plus perhaps not having the right data to make a good decision around like what tools to keep, what tools to replace, what tools to just take out of their budget totally. And so, I'm really proud of, folks like Curriculum Associates and Cambium Assessment having really good solutions that have proven, right, to lift the academic ROI of our customers that are buying and purchasing those tools, but also, and most importantly, the kids that are using them, that we want to have engaged experiences. We want them to have fun, right, coming to school. I worry about kids that are not having fun coming to school. We have, I don't know what the latest stats were, but post pandemic, I think the level of absenteeism definitely jumped double digits. From my understanding of some of the research. And so when I think of, kids not wanting to come to school, and when I think of chronic absenteeism, I think it's 18 days or more missing from school. So there's kids missing 18 days or more of school. And so those are the kids I worry about. How do we get them back into school? How do we get them the tools that they need? And then how do we get our teachers to make sure that they feel supported in the classroom and that we're attracting, right, more and more good talent to the teaching profession in general? And I think having the product focus that Sabina just mentioned and really prioritizing our customers is always going to be key. And if you do the right thing, I guess my belief, maybe it's too rosy. If you do the right thing, the numbers will show based on the value that you're delivering.
Well, and I think it's evident that you are both leaders at extremely successful organizations, and you both just mentioned an extreme focus on customer success and prioritizing your customer needs above all else. And that probably has a lot to do with the success of your organizations because, again, that's coming from the leadership level. And if that's where it starts, then it's going to be embedded throughout. And building upon what both of you just touched on, you both mentioned short-term and long-term priorities and trying to keep everything aligned as well as aligning with your customer needs. So when everything has a sense of urgency, how do you decide what actually gets your attention?
I can start this one. I think it comes back to our mission of making classrooms better for teachers and students, and the strategy that we've built around that, which is to build the best possible solutions for students and support educators with the best possible service and implementation support. And we're just laser focused on that, and working really hard to understand needs, to continue to listen, to continue to look at our data and enhance what we're building, but then also keeping an eye on the technologies that are coming, like AI, and really trying to understand how we can leverage them responsibly and intentionally in our solutions, but also how we work internally. We believe that while AI is still in its early stages, and we're all still trying to learn and figure it out, that the potential is just incredible and will just unlock so much value for our industry, but also how we work and how work actually gets done.
I love that. And just I would say ditto everything that you just said. And just I wanted to just give a little bit more of an example of what we've done at Cambium Learning to try and help with the whole sense of urgency and prioritization. There's not enough time in the day to do everything that needs to be done, and there'll never be enough time in the day. So prioritization, ruthless prioritization, is always something that is top of mind. Easy to say, hard to do. I think this past year, Cambium, we launched an enterprise-wide initiative called #Better Together. We have because we're so large, it's been really important for us to better understand what are the best practices that are happening in each one of our teams and divisions or power brands. And what we notice is that we were same people had same problems and were being solved in different divisions across the company, and we didn't know we were solving the same problems. And so the whole idea of Better Together was trying to figure out how do we connect the dots around making sure that one of our business units, like Lexia, if they're solving an issue that's very similar to what our Time for Learning team is doing, that we bring the right people together, because at scale, they might not actually know who each other is because we're so big. And so we created a lot more collaboration structures intentionally this year to lift up and connect people to make sure that we weren't solving the problem 2 or 3 times, we were solving it once. But for example, if we didn't have that structure, that collaboration structure, it's actually called collaboration meetups. These are monthly meetings where we bring subject matter experts or functional kind of role-alike groups together. And it's very intentional around kind of like what are the urgent problems or urgent opportunities. It's not just problems, it's also opportunities. Like there's some amazing work that our Cambium assessment team is doing in the world of AI and machine learning that actually could be pushed out across the rest of the organization. And I just love hearing about those success stories because it can be pushed out, and other people can listen and understand and actually implement. And so speaking about implementation and customer success, we're finding a lot of opportunities to embed some of the new innovation across the enterprise with a more intentional focus on #Better Together. So that's just a
That's
live example of how we try to implement.
I love that example. That solution seemingly solves 2 problems of avoiding redundancies and building a more cohesive work culture, which
You
that's
got it.
excellent.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so you both touched on AI. Let's kick that door down and transition over into talking about AI. And in particular, I'd like to talk about strategy versus reality. So, Kemi, I'll start with you. Where is AI genuinely changing how you operate, and where is it still more expectation than reality?
Oh, we could talk about this for all day.
I know.
Yeah. So in terms of how it's changing how we're operating, I'll start with the internal and I'll go to the external. So internally, we have an internal roadmap of very, high priority AI initiatives. I'll just give you a couple examples. And by the way, we are very much about making sure that we're leveraging AI for what AI is good at and leveraging humans for what humans are good at. And so, that's easier said than done. And I think there's a lot of fear, right, around, the whole concept of, how do you integrate AI ethically, responsibly into an organization? And so we are having those ongoing conversations, and we want to be as transparent as possible with our employees and, work together and do things together. But internally, we're leveraging AI I would say, as an accelerator. And what that looks like, we're leveraging AI to do things that we normally wouldn't have hired humans anyways. So, for example, brand enforcement, speaking of marketing and brand, we have situations where people are using our brand in ways that they shouldn't be. We could have hired hundreds of lawyers or analysts to take a look at websites and social and to see how our brand is being used legally or illegally, and resolve those issues and say, hey, you know what, that's not a proper use of our brand, and please take that down. Now we use an AI tool called Tracer AI that actually does it for us and sends out correspondence and says, please take that down. And we actually, so that's a very much of a yes, and we're using AI to avoid cost. And we're using AI to actually protect our brand in ways that we could never have done before, especially in international markets. So that's one thing. And that's an accelerator and total value add. I think internally, we also are looking at AI to help employees with productivity. I mean, these are the basic type of things. This year, we're focused on basic, foundational AI literacy across our organization. How do people use Copilot off of Microsoft, Copilot, GitHub, Gemini, some of the typical kind of employee tools that will help build AI literacy. And then we're really doing a lot of experimentation around functional use of AI powered tools to do functions like content management, like product engineering, like QA. And so a lot of pilots are really helping us rethink kind of workflows and how we work, which is really exciting. So that's internal. Just a little couple of topics. External, this is all about the teacher, the educator, the student in the classroom. Our Cambium assessment team launched AI-powered writing, I would say tutor or assistant called Cambi for educators that we're really excited. It helps give kids just-in-time help when they're writing their essays, and it gives feedback. And so that helps out kids get more comfortable writing essays. They don't have to wait for a teacher to give them written comments, whatever else. That also can happen. Again, we're not replacing that, but we're just giving that bump and confidence for kids that are writing essays. So that's super exciting. And then we are also, our Time for Learning business doing some really cool stuff around leveraging AI for homework helper. They're going to be coming out with something around homework helper, which is really exciting. And then last of all, I would say we are also working on more leveraging AI to help connect data, student data, with helping kids get great constructional help. Meaning, like, if we know what their assessments look like, we know that Sabina is struggling in these learning standards. How can we connect her data to the actual help that she needs with the curriculum? And so there's some really cool stuff that will be coming out for back to school around that to help teachers, bridge to practice, and really help them eliminate some of the kind of manual work they're trying to do to match up the curricular materials with the assessment. So those are a couple of examples.
That's
So
great.
yeah, what
It's
about
really
you?
great to hear, Kemi, how another organization is navigating this. It's just all moving so fast. And I'd love to add a few examples on the CA side. Externally, I mean, we continue to believe that the educator, the teacher, is the hero in the classroom. And it's really about how can AI help them? How can it be a partner to them and help them unlock things that they weren't able to do before? So for us, it's really about listening to how they're experiencing AI, where there may be workflows that can be enhanced, and having that strong dialogue as they're navigating it too. But we know that more and more teachers are using AI and experimenting themselves. So helping them do it responsibly with built-in tools um, is where we see a lot of opportunity. It's also a huge focus for us internally. I'll talk about sort of three different things that we're looking at. The first is really like clarity, transparency, and communication, as well as training. Um, Whether someone is going to work at CA or otherwise, we believe that having AI fluency will like help everyone in the future, and it's something that the workforce has to have. And we want our teams to feel equipped to really leverage AI and use it in their work going forward. And so that training and transparency around how we look at AI and is really, really critical. We're also investing in tools, right? There's no shortage of tools, but ensuring that we know what tools can be used for different use cases, and then that we have safe implementation of them, whether it's like an enterprise type tool with different guardrails in place. That's a key focus for us. And then in terms of how we work with it, I'll say that we've been doing a good job like at the task level, and every team now is experimenting, and it's helping us move faster. It's helping us also do things that we weren't able to do before at all. I'll give an example. We do a ton of research. We have a ton of customer research and NPS scores and verbatims. It's impossible for a human to consume all of this data, but with AI, and we've built some agents, we can now analyze all of these different data sources and get insights that we just weren't able to get before. And as we continue to experiment, where we're going to really start focusing is like, how can we reinvent entire workflows from beginning to end and approach the work differently with AI being a partner from the start. So that's sort of the next wave of experimentation that we're now diving into.
Sabina, I'd like to push in a little bit on that, and just in on the topic in general, just to get your sense of how much of AI being used right now is being driven by customer needs versus market pressure.
For us, we are always going to focus on customer needs. AI is not something we're going to introduce for AI sake. That is something that we are going to hold on to strongly. Anything we do is deeply entrenched in what we believe is best for our users, whether it's an educator or a student, which is why we're doing a tremendous amount of research and really want to understand like what are those use cases, where can AI really add value, and then making sure that we implement it responsibly and intentionally. This is not something that we will do just for the sake of doing, because we believe that we need to have a product out there in the market. It's always going to be driven by how it enhances ultimately outcomes and the experience of our users.
Same. It's very seductive to just go with the flow, especially in the AI space. But I think, I think we're my prediction is we're coming to a head and a reckoning and calibration, at least for some pockets of the space, around what AI tools, like how to think about how to screen for what's good AI and what's not so great. And I think some of the research and studies around tools, I should say, I think consumers are getting smarter and smarter around how to make decisions around what to look for. And so my hope is that with a lot of the guidance, even at the policy level, my team is I run an enterprise government relations team. And even at the policy level, I think there's a lot of guidance out there. The first guidance was people didn't know enough, so there was loose guidance and people were just testing out what was going to stick as the market actually evolved. I think now we don't have as many excuses before of like, oh, we don't know enough. Actually, we do know a lot about what works and what doesn't work. My hope that calibration will continue, where the guidance, the policy, the support will help our consumers and customers make good decisions. And we want to be part of helping role model what those good decisions could be. Of course, we always would want you to pick our products because we feel our products are the best. But to Sabina's point, like, we are laser focused with the customer, and we've turned down things because we didn't feel it was the right thing, because of quote unquote the market was going in that direction. Because we have I think really deep relationships and input from our customers that said otherwise, and we're like, hey, we're going to take that risk. We're gonna listen to the customers and wait out some of those other things that perhaps are seducing others to move in that direction.
That's so refreshing to hear. I love that. So thank you for all of those insights. And as Kemi said, I'm sure we could spend the entire session on AI. But I'm going to keep us moving forward and start to talk about another challenging topic, which is budgets. And you touched on this also briefly earlier. So there are countless pressures on school districts right now. They're really being forced to analyze their budgets and spending patterns. You mentioned, ESSER has ceased. And that pressure in turn tends to resonate with anyone in ed tech who is attempting to serve those markets. So, Sabina, I'll start with you here. Do you feel like efficacy and proof of return on of ROI are those still the best ways to market, or do you find that there is real benefit and value in flashy demos or having a strong narrative?
While it is important to, of course, have a strong and clear narrative and be really clear about like what we offer as a company and why someone would partner with us, it is all about efficacy and ensuring that we actually deliver on the promise of what we say. And I think that's now even more important, where districts are having to make really tough decisions. Um, we feel really fortunate that we have products that have been in the market for a long time, and we have tremendous data. We're able to tell great stories, not just about the quantitative outcomes and the growth and the data that we're seeing, but also the stories of how our solutions and our partnership like has made a difference in districts. So I think there's a quantitative story to, yes, show the efficacy and show the data, but then there's also the human side, right? Like really being able to work well with our partners and um, being a partner that is reliable and one that they can count on, that's by their side. And again, I think that is such an important part right now where difficult decisions have to be made, and districts are choosing the solutions they use and the solutions from which they see value. And that is coming out very clearly in our storytelling. We lean on data, we lean on research, we lean on efficacy, we lean on our customers telling our story together with us.
So, what I'm hearing is that it doesn't have to be either or, and hopefully the efficacy can feed the demos and the narrative storytelling. Hopefully they're not so out of alignment with each other that they can actually work together pretty well.
Yeah, I think
Um,
this
oh,
is a
please.
yes and I would say. I just from working in New York City government, and working in a building right across from OMB, or the Office of Management and Budget. I learned heavily about the budgeting process of a large district like New York City, and I would say it's a yes and, I think customers actually don't my experience is customers don't want the showy demos. They want the experience. They want you to tell them what the experience is. How will students experience your product? How will teachers experience your service or your implementation? And I think being as authentic as possible and having the demos as a supportive function, but not the headliner, is something that I think our customers want to see, because I think they're dealing with enormous pressure, and they want things that work. But I would also say is that there are times where I've had situations with customers that, speaking of the long-term kind of strategy and game, they've made decisions where they've had to make a tight budget decision year one. For example, professional learning. In my old job, not right now, but there's some districts that said, "Hey, we want to try this ourselves. We want to implement the curriculum. We're going to buy the curriculum, and we're not going to buy the implementation services." And we knew we're like, eek, like probably not the best decision, because they do go together, and it's an investment over time, but we're going to not let you, that's your choice. And so we are here to support you regardless if you get the complimentary professional learning to go with the curriculum or not. We'll still be with you because we're your partner. It's not just a 1 year kind of like running, I call it drive by. We are not driving by anywhere. So we are with you multi-year, and our goal is all to have multi-year relationships. And so And what I've seen with some of those decisions in tight budget years, customers might make a decision that year and then come back to us the next year and say, hey, you know what? We tried that. And that wasn't really great for teachers or kids. Now we want to have the implementation services. And now we've actually figured out how to reprioritize our budget. So I always say, as a former client manager, sometimes customers have to make hard decisions that are not in line with perhaps what you know is perhaps in their best interest relative to the research and efficacy and how implementation could work and the lift that they're going to get from um, an implementation, but stick with them. And I think our customers we've built enough relational trust with them for them to be open and say, hey, you know what? I really should have done that, or I could have done that. I'm glad you stuck with me, or maybe I want to pivot again. And that's, to me, what a partnership is about, is the long run and being able to pivot and know that this is an investment over time. It's not one and done, and it's not drive by. And if it is drive by, then it turns into tactical. And then we don't really have a relationship. We just have an arrangement, which is not where we want to be either.
Yeah. So what I'm also hearing here is that not only are your decisions aligned with your customer needs, but also with that long-term relationship building. And it sounds like both need to be a strong priority. And knowing
Absolutely.
that priority can help you with making those challenging decisions, I'm imagining.
Mhm.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
So transitioning a little bit here into a really important topic and one that I am very interested in hearing both of your thoughts on. I'd like to talk about the what we'll call the pipeline into positions of power. And Kemi, I'm going to begin with you here. Some recent reports have suggested or seem to indicate that there is a decline in women in EdTech leadership roles. So, what do you think is actually driving that?
I love this conversation, this topic. I just actually came from another topic just like this around the pipeline. And I think the numbers from what I've seen have gone down this past year in terms of the number of ed tech female. I don't know if it's CEOs or just like C-suite folks within the industry, which is, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm surprised. I think it's a constant thing that we need to pay attention to. And so, the pipeline, I think, starts early in terms of how do you think about, how do you fill the pipeline at the beginning. And I would say, you know, one of the things that we've done at Cambium is making sure that number one, our female leaders have the structures and places to step into their power seat, and it's not like perhaps a C level, but we try and make sure that those structures are created from the get go. So, for example, those collaboration meetups that I just mentioned for SMEs across the organization, a lot of those collaboration meetups are showcasing female leadership and the contributions that they're making to our growth, our impact, et cetera. That's one structure we created. Other structures we created are around making sure women can bring their multiple identities to work through employee resource groups. So we have informal structures like ERGs where they're co-led by a man or a woman together, or two women. For example, our women's inclusion network is led by two amazing female leaders. A lot of their events are attended by women, and guess what? And men. And so that's actually a very different vibe than when I was 10 years ago a chief diversity officer. One of the companies I was at was called WIN as well. It was Women's Interest Network. And now it's Women's Inclusion Network. Even the language change is just signaling to me that there's more allyship and partnership across genders. And so that's starting at the beginning to help fill the pipeline. I think when you get into the middle of the pipeline, middle career, I think it's about sharing power. And people that need to share power are the people that are already in the power seats. And so I've seen success with companies that their CEOs or their C-level, C-suite are actually open to sharing power. And what that looks like is not mentorship. It's not you sitting down for coffee every month to talk about me mentoring you. It's about, the cliche term sponsorship, sticking my neck out and saying, hey, you know what? This person actually has potential, and this woman leader, we really need to pay attention to give them the opportunity. And then the opportunity, I will end with saying, the opportunity looks like very much intentional, either rotational roles or stretch assignments. I mean, for me personally, my journey from a deputy COO to my first C-level suite was because somebody advocated for me for a role that I actually didn't feel like I was ready for. And so my move to power seat almost didn't happen because I was doing I'm not qualified. I didn't check off the 10 things on the job description. So maybe I shouldn't put my hat in the ring. So that I had to silence the inner critic and say, okay, wait a minute. I have this amazing advocate and sponsor who's telling me to consider it. And I have a village of people that said that go for it. And I'm still second guessing. So part of it is also women needing to like reframe and say, like, if it's not me, why not me? Right? Why not me? And so I had to take my power back and claim it. And so it's two-way street is what I would say, sharing the power and then taking the power, and not in silencing that inner critic is something that I talk a lot about, especially with folks that are coming up in the pipeline. But what about you, Sabina?
I love your answer, Kemi. Sharing your power and taking your powers is really great. Yeah, I agree that as leaders, it is important to bring others along and being that advocate, as you mentioned, and um, seeing seeing talent in others, seeing when others maybe need a push, just like we needed that push in our career as well. And I'll say something that's maybe a little bit controversial, but early on in my career, I've seen women where women weren't always allies to one another, and maybe because they felt like they had to fight really hard. And I think we need to let that go and just help grow everyone to meet their potential. Um, and I think then there's also an organizational responsibility, right? As an organization, as a company, what are we doing to recognizing talent or just giving folks opportunities to grow, to have mentorship, to have some of these stretch assignments. And so at CA we have a few different programs that do that. They're like intensive cohort type courses where um, different groups of leaders or even individual contributors who want to grow their leadership skills are brought together and have opportunities to work on stretch projects, to network within their cohort, to have in-person time. And as a leadership team, like we're expected to be present for these events too, so that they hear from our CEO, who happens to be a woman. They hear from other leaders around the organization, uh, which I think can just be a really like nice motivator um, to just hear from different people, hear different stories, and see that anything really is possible.
I love that.
I do too. Yeah, those structural supports are integral to success. So, one other thing I'd like to hear from both of you is let's think about somebody who is early in her career, or maybe even someone who's midway through her career, working at a company that does not have those existing sponsors and supports and is not feeling that structure. What's something she could do to help her step into more ownership sooner and get her on that leadership trajectory that she might be aspiring to?
I can take this one first. Um, I would say raise your hand and say yes, even if you're not feeling quite ready. Um, I think all of us probably have stepped into situations in our career where we didn't feel completely prepared or didn't feel completely comfortable, but just stepping in, raising your hand if you see a job to be done, if you see a problem to be solved. And it doesn't have to mean leadership in terms of like managing teams. Leadership can be bringing people together, solving a complex challenge that hasn't been solved before, but really taking that ownership and creating progress in some way. So I would say if you see an opportunity where something can be better, or there is a project that maybe others don't want, maybe it's not something quite in your wheelhouse, maybe it's not something you quite feel ready, raise your hand anyway. And the learning that happens is tremendous. And what I always love is being able to look back to those moments and maybe remember the struggles, but being able to say, hey, we made it. We made it through this and I learned. And that gives you an energy that then helps carry you through to the next challenge that maybe you're not quite ready for.
That's great. I would add that I think that woman uh, should lead into building community. And building community could look like, it could be something informal, it could be something social. Again, I'm probably channeling my niece, who everything at work is about social. And I'm like, does any work get done over there? I'm half joking, but not really. Um, so building community could be building community around a purpose, though, not just randomness. Around a purpose, it could be building a role like community, bringing together all the marketing professionals and in her organization, or all the revenue, the customer facing sales people. I don't really know. Because to me, building a community that actually is represented with multiple identities, I think is really helpful. When I say multiple identities, it could be gender, race, ethnicity, um, backgrounds, etc. Some people might be coming from government like I did. And I think, but building it around a purpose, what's your shared purpose? I think the easiest thing to think about is like a function, perhaps. But there's other things that could be lighter in terms of like on the social side of things. But I really feel like building a community around purpose, starting with, the business could be something, because it could be a platform is what I'm saying, around sharing ideas and making those networking conversations work for you, to create and drive a culture. I believe everybody at a company is a culture carrier until you're not. And so you can carry the culture in positive ways, or you can carry a culture in toxic ways. And my hope is that, by building community with a purpose, you can be a culture carrier and hopefully change that organization and give them another idea to think about relative to helping the pipeline.
That's awesome. That is really tangible advice from both of you. I appreciate that. And it looks like we are coming to the end of our time together. So, in closing, Sabina, what is one thing that you're optimistic about in EdTech right now?
I feel incredibly fortunate that we get to navigate these times of change and new technologies in an industry that is still focused on such an important mission. At the forefront, um, the work we do with educators and students um, continues to be so important. And in some ways, they may need us more now than ever before. And so, being able to really keep that mission at our forefront and having it be our kind of guiding guidepost, our North Star for anything we do, I think gives us something very tangible to hang on to and navigate change, navigate new ways of working um, in a way that's gonna like really help us and keep us focused on that.
Thanks for
Just to
that.
build on that,
Yep.
I am very optimistic about the future relative to how technology can reinvent the educational end-to-end experience, and really be able to serve students that have not been well served in the past, and to serve teachers like my mother and my father, who struggled as novice teachers and assistant principals and principals, because they didn't have access to resources. They were just trying to do so many things, right? And so when you think about the capacity that technology can, the capacity building that technology can help out those folks, I think I'm really inspired and excited about the things that we're doing, the things I know Curriculum Associates is doing to help that kind of reimagination of the end-to-end experience. And so, lots of work to be done, but there's a lot of seeds that are being planted as we speak and more.
That's excellent. I love to end in an area of hopefulness and optimism. That's so important. And what really stands out for me from this conversation is, we kept circling back to mission driven, serving our customers, and letting that be a driving force in decision making, especially when the decisions get hard. And that's really very helpful for our audience to hear, especially since so much of leadership is not visible, and it is those behind the scenes decisions and the trade offs that have to be made. That's really what's going to define the outcomes. So I really appreciate how open and candid you both were and for you taking the time to speak with me today. These aren't conversations that always get a lot of airtime, but I think that they're ones that really help people understand what leadership looks like in practice. So thank you both for your insights today. And for everyone who's watching, whether you are already in a position of leadership or if you are aspiring to one, hopefully this gave you a clearer sense of the complexity and the opportunities that lie in that path. So thank you both for this conversation. And thanks to everyone who watched.